What a way to get started. Good morning. Welcome to All Souls. My name is Laura Pedersen, and I'm delighted to be here with David Rockefeller this morning. We're both longtime members of All Souls. We're so happy to have you with us here in the sanctuary today, or joining us by live stream. Hi, Mom in Buffalo. We are a welcoming and inclusive community of members and friends. If you're a newcomer or a visitor, please join us for coffee hour downstairs right after the service, because we'd love to get to know you. I'd like to thank our incredibly talented musicians who are sharing their time and artistic gifts with us this morning, Maestro Trent Johnson and wow. And the magnificent singer and guitarist Nathan Seiler. A few announcements. There's a young adults bagel brunch this morning at coffee hour. Look out for Gretchen, who has designated some tables for you. After coffee hour, we have a board meeting at 1 p.m. in the Ware Room and a capital campaign focus group at 1 p.m. in the Forest Church Gallery. All are welcome at both. There's a caregivers support circle on Zoom at 3 p.m. Next week is Pride Sunday, and members of All Queer Souls will lead our service. And now I invite you to set your electronic devices to church mode, please, and prepare your hearts to hear the call to worship.
Stop. Good morning, and thanks so much to James Backman and all our young musicians. Fantastic job. Today's opening words are from Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. As time went on, and the months and years came and went, he was never without friends. Fern did not come regularly to the barn anymore. She was growing up and was careful to avoid childish things, like sitting on a milk stool near a pig pen. But Charlotte's children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, year after year, lived in the doorway. Each spring, there were new little spiders hatching out to take the place of the old. Most of them sailed away on their balloons, but always 2 or 3 stayed and set up housekeeping in the doorway. Mr. Zuckerman took fine care of Wilbur all the rest of his days, and the pig was often visited by friends and admirers, for nobody ever forgot the year of his triumph and the miracle of the web. Life in the barn was very good, night and day, winter and summer, spring and fall, dull days and bright days. It was the best place to be, thought Wilbur. This warm, delicious cellar with the garrulous geese, the changing seasons, the heat of the sun, the passage of swallows, the nearness of rats, the sameness of sheep, the love of spiders, the smell of manure, and the glory of everything. And now I invite you to rise with me as you are willing and able, and repeat with me our bond of union. In the freedom of the truth and in the spirit of love, we unite for the worship of God and the service of all.
Let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue. Amen.
Please be seated. We have some late-breaking news. The board meeting has been moved to 2:15 p.m., and that will help the deacons going to the 1 o'clock meeting. Our responsive reading for today is from Won't You Be My Neighbor by television host and Presbyterian minister Fred Rogers. It's printed in your order of service. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Our first hymn today is Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, printed in your order of service. Please rise as you are able, and let's sing together.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Today's reading is from the Bible, the book of Luke, chapter 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise."
Well, in 1941, a happy father had a son. And by 1944, the father walked right out the door. And in 45, the mom and son were still alive. But who could tell in 46 if the 2 were to survive? Well, the years were passing quickly, but not fast enough for him. So he closed his eyes till 55, and he opened them up again. When he looked around, he saw a clown, and the clown seemed very gay. And he set that night to join the circus clown and run away. Da 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 dee dee da 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 dee dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 da. Well, he followed every railroad track and every highway sign, and he had a girl in each new town and the towns he left behind. And the open road was the only road he knew, but the color of his dreams are slowly turning into blue. Then he met a girl, the kind of girl he wanted all his life. She was soft and kind and good to him, so he took her for a wife. And they got a house not far from town, and in a little while the girl had seen the doctor, and she came home with a smile. Now in 1961 a happy father had a son, and by 1964 the father walked right out the door. And in 65 the mom and son were still around. But what will happen to the boy when the circus comes to town?
Quiet our hearts and minds for a period of meditation and prayer. Today's reflection is called The Caretaker by Stephen MacLeod. "Don't walk on the grass," shouted the little man. "Don't be stupid," the large man replied. "It doesn't feel anything." "You must take care for it," retorted the little man. "It gives us beauty, but it's fragile." "Whatever," the large man walked away. Years later, each had moved on. Indifferently, the cemetery grass grew over both. Now, please rise as you are able, and let's sing together, "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" in your order of service.
Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone? The girls have picked them every one. Oh, when will they ever learn? Oh, when will they ever learn?
Our practice of collecting and offering is a sacrament of this self-sustaining and self-governing congregation, which is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. Our offering today will now be given and received to support our mission of transforming our own lives and the world around us.
I sailed a wild, wild sea, climbed up a tall, tall mountain. I met an old, old man beneath a weeping willow tree. He said, now if you got some questions, go and lay them at my feet. But my time here is brief, so I'll have to pick just 3. And I said, what do you do with the pieces of a broken heart? And how can a man like me remain in the light? And if life is really as short as they say, then why are the nights so long? Then the sun went down and he sang for me this song. See, I once was a young fool like you, afraid to do the things that I knew I had to do. So I played an escapade just like you. I played an escapade just like you. I sailed the wild, wild sea, climbed up a tall, tall mountain. I met an old, old man. He sat beneath the sapling tree. He said, now if you got some questions, go and lay them at my feet. For my time here is brief, so you'll have to pick just 3. And I said, what do you do with the pieces of a broken heart? And how can a man like me remain in the light? And if life is really as short as they say, then why are the nights so long? Then the sun went down and he sang for me this song. Life is really as short as they say, then why are the nights so long? Then the sun went down and he sang for me this song.
Hello again. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you today. My Irish grandfather was a writer, although people always said the best stories weren't by him, but about him. I grew up in an Irish neighborhood in Buffalo back when the area was 80% Catholic. I was the only child anyone had ever laid eyes on. People wanted a tour of my bedroom. Families tended to be large. One family of 12 had a Kristen and a Christine. Even though I was technically in a public school, every Friday they served fish sticks, as dictated by the Bible in Paul's letter to Mrs. Paul. And whenever we kids twisted an ankle or pierced a lung, the teachers told us to walk it off or offer it up. If you said, "Wow, it's hot out," they said, "but we know a hotter place, don't we?" There were lots of rules kids were supposed to pray and obey. Women elaborated on these rules to suit their own objectives. If a mother didn't like the outfit, it was the 70s, short shorts and tube tops, she'd say that if something happened, God forbid, that's what you'd be wearing throughout all eternity. And she didn't have to say where you'd be wearing it throughout all eternity. As a child in kindergarten, the best part of the day was story time after lunch, when the teacher would gather us in a circle and regale us with the doings of clever Charlotte and her billboard of a web, which helped us to learn about friendship and mortality, or that poor, ugly duckling who taught us not to judge others based on how they look. Storytime came to an end once we learned to read for ourselves the following year. But that didn't quench our love of being told tales. Even in New York City, I'm constantly amazed at the number of people, from housekeepers and taxi drivers to computer programmers and thoracic surgeons, who head home after a hard day's work and want to read a story or watch one on TV or play a video game that has a narrative. We use stories to put children to sleep and also ourselves. And even when we go to sleep, the mind stays up telling itself stories. On top of that, studies show that we have 2,000 daydreams every day. More if you're on our church finance committee. We all have preferences for storylines that are sad, funny, true, or scary. In our free time, we read them in books, magazines, and newspapers, and see them played out in movies or performed on stage as plays, musicals, and operas. In school, stories were used to help us comprehend enormous historical events, such as All Quiet on the Western Front for World War I, Anne Frank for World War II, and Trinity for the Irish struggle for independence. Putting on Lorraine Hansberry's stage play, A Raisin in the Sun, opened a window onto a single family's fight against racism in 1950s Chicago. During my childhood, a shocking story unfolded just a few miles away. Love Canal was a working-class neighborhood in western New York built atop a toxic waste dump that caused residents to develop a multitude of cancers while their children had horrendous birth defects. It was a case where corporate counsel and local officials had an incentive to tell the story in a way that wouldn't lead to expensive lawsuits and bad publicity. Love Canal residents weren't doctors, lawyers, professors, and journalists. They were factory workers, bus drivers, and lunch ladies. It was before the internet. The recession was bearing down hard. However, an area housewife named Lois Gibbs decided to try and tell the stories of her neighbors, how they were stonewalled, denied health care, and not compensated for having to move. The Center for Public Inquiry described her plight in a story called From Homemaker to Hellraiser.
The woman who helped free an entire community from a toxic dump, literally rewriting environmental laws in the process, was so shy at the start of the struggle that she attempted to hide behind a tree when neighbors called on her. Nevertheless, Lois Gibbs took to the stage that day in April of 1978 in the seemingly idyllic community of Love Canal and began to find her voice. In 1980, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, issued a study showing that the chemicals in the area could trigger genetic damage for future generations. In other words, that the community's children could be sickened and their grandchildren too. Yet, the federal government still resisted pleas to move everyone out. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, Gibbs said. Her neighbors just went crazy. Housewives in pink hair rollers rocked cars in the streets one Saturday. Neighbors poured gasoline on one lawn spelling EPA and lit it afire. That's when you knew you no longer had control, Gibbs recalls. It was scary. As the lawn smoldered, 2 EPA officials were holed up in a hotel nearby. Gibbs invited them to come to a recently abandoned home where residents were meeting to talk about their study. When the officials stepped in, a communal brainstorm built up. Let's hold them hostage. Standing shoulder to shoulder, the residents blockaded the EPA spokesman and scientist from leaving. However, the hostages were fed sandwiches and homemade oatmeal cookies and allowed to meet with members of the press. The FBI swooped into Love Canal and shut off outside access to the phones. The scene put the spotlight just where the community wanted it, upon President Jimmy Carter, deep in a rough re-election campaign. The nation would see what the sitting president would do. 6 hours later, residents let the EPA men go, but they gave the president 4 days until noon Wednesday to act, or else. Gibbs and her neighbors never knew what or else was, and they prayed their spur-of-the-moment deadline would work. Convinced the FBI would lock them up for taking federal officials hostage, some residents went to bed fully clothed. I didn't want to go to jail in my jammies, Gibbs said. The feds never stormed their homes, but 2 days later, the White House agreed to temporarily relocate all Love Canal families. It was the first time in American history that federal funds were used for a situation other than a natural disaster. Long before Erin Brockovich became a movie, Gibbs helped secure an environmental victory of greater heft. Transforming herself from homemaker to hellraiser, she helped convince then-President Jimmy Carter to come to town in 1980 and remove 900 families from a 21,000-ton toxic dump. Had it not been for Lois Gibbs insisting that this version of the story be heard, Love Canal would not have become the first government Superfund cleanup site. Lois Gibbs earned the Goldman Environmental Prize and has this advice for the rest of us. People need to stand up, hold hands, and talk about alternatives. Alternatives, alternatives, alternatives. And that people who are united will never, ever be defeated.
War, famine, and natural disaster are often confusing and overwhelming until we can focus on a single being and say, that could be me, or my parents, or my child, and be reminded that 1 million is not incomprehensible, but actually 1 + 1 + 1, and so forth. I may not be able to save an entire country or city, but I am capable of helping one person. We tell stories to heal and support one another in groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, because hearing about the hopes and challenges faced by others helps us to better understand our own problems and fears. Unfortunately, stories can divide as well as they unite. Every side in a war has its own version of events that can become a justification for killing. Terrorists are called freedom fighters at home. Churches are built over pagan worship sites and then mosques on top of those, thereby replacing one story with another. Abraham Lincoln was referring to the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin when he allegedly told Harriet Beecher Stowe, "So, you're the little lady that started this great war." It was the first American novel to sell 1 million copies in the United States when the population was less than 24 million. It sounds odd, but the ancient Greek philosopher Plato wanted to ban stories. He believed that rational argument could not take hold in a culture until all the storytellers were forcibly expelled because literature was perilous to society. What I think he was getting at is that stories are so powerful when it comes to explaining the world that we may believe them even if they're not true. From the time we're born, we're dependent on people to tell us what is true and false, good and bad, right and wrong. We tend to have big imaginations. In recent decades, young people have devoured the Harry Potter stories. A disconnected youth finds out he's actually a wizard, which not only makes him special, but gives him confidence, along with a rich social life. Readers discover the joys of inclusivity, standing up for what's right, and working toward the greater good, without sitting through a boring school assembly, parental lecture, or church sermon. This bit of advice, for example, is best received coming from Hogwarts' charismatic headmaster Dumbledore, who says, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." And there are numerous stories throughout history of friends influencing one another.
When English novelist Charles Dickens first visited the United States in 1842 at the age of 30, he met and interacted with a number of Unitarians who impressed him deeply. He met Dr. William Ellery Channing, the foremost Unitarian leader of his day and an ardent opponent of slavery, whose plaque is on the wall over there, for helping to found this congregation. After returning to London, Dickens writes a letter to one of his new transatlantic friends, the Unitarian president of Harvard University, Cornelius Felton, saying, "I have carried into effect an old idea of mine and joined the Unitarians, who would do something for human improvement if they could, and practice charity and toleration." Next, Dickens tours the Cornish tin mines, where he sees children working in appalling conditions. The suffering he witnesses is compounded by a visit to the Field Lane Ragged School, one of several set up for London's half-starved, illiterate street children, hence the name Ragged. An 1843 parliamentary report exposes the effects of the Industrial Revolution on poor children and inspires Dickens to write and publish a political pamphlet titled "An Appeal to the People of England on Behalf of the Poor Man's Child." It had very little impact. At a fundraising speech on October 5, 1843, in the heavily industrialized city of Manchester, Dickens urges the work-worn laborers and employers to join together on educational reform. Once again, to little effect. But he has an epiphany. The most effective way to make an impression on the broadest segment of the population when it comes to poverty and injustice is not to write a polemic or an essay with a long name, but instead a deeply felt Christmas narrative, one that will, in his words, strike a sledgehammer blow for the poor. It's during his 3 days in Manchester that Dickens conceives the plot for a fictional tale that brilliantly weaves his own religious beliefs and concerns about the poor into a captivating tale for people of all ages and faiths. A Christmas Carol is completed in just 6 weeks and published in December of 1843 when Dickens is 31, and just 18 months after returning from his visit to America. Now, Dickens wasn't the first author to celebrate the Christmas season in literature, but he'll superimpose his humanitarian vision of the holiday onto the public. By the end of A Wild Night, Scrooge understands the consequences of poverty on society, our obligation to help those in need, and that it's never too late to experience redemption. We're presented with the notion of taking personal responsibility for how we live and the ability to change our minds about how we live, no matter how old or set in our ways we might be. This is the opposite of the predestination favored by the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and the Calvinists. The effect of A Christmas Carol was immediate and overwhelming. After reading the story, many employers gave workers an extra day off. The spirit of Christmas, newly defined by Dickens, was everywhere. Novelist William Makepeace Thackeray called the book a national benefit, and to every man and woman who reads it, a personal kindness. Scottish novelist Margaret Oliphant said A Christmas Carol was regarded as a new gospel, and noted that the book was unique in that it actually made people behave better. Back in America, one Mr. Fairbanks attended a reading on Christmas Eve in Boston and was so moved he closed his factory on Christmas Day and sent every employee a turkey. The book's impact can also be seen in Frank Capra's 1946 movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And Scrooge most certainly influenced Unitarian writer Theodore Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, with his 1957 children's story, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Charles Dickens asks for people to recognize the plight of those that the Industrial Revolution had injured, made ill, driven into poverty, or left behind, and highlights the obligation of society to treat them humanely. Whatever Dickens' exact religious beliefs, and much has been written on the subject, whereas most people of his time would say that they hope to meet again in a better world, Dickens wished for us all to want to mend the world we're in right now. In fact, here's what All Souls congregant William Cullen Bryant wrote about his young friend. Charles Dickens' humor is frequently broad farce, and his horrors are often exaggerated, extravagant, and improbable. But he still has so much humor and so much pathos that his defects are overlooked. Without birth, wealth, title, or a sword, the man's only claims to distinctions are in his intellect and heart. Yet, he is received with a feeling that was formerly rendered only to conquerors and kings. His sympathy is for the masses, that class with whom American institutions and laws sympathize most strongly.
The hard sciences help us to understand the natural world. The social sciences help us measure behavior patterns across populations. But the liberal arts help us determine how we experience the world, and specifically that we all experience it differently. Aristotle says in Poetics that storytelling is what gives us a shareable world. It's through stories we can sort out and express our problems, and then it's through stories we can find cures and resolutions. In fact, studies show we are persuaded more by stories than statistics. Sorry, you STEM majors. And that we recall facts longer if they are embedded within narratives. Stories boost production of cortisol, raising attentiveness, and thereby encouraging connection and community. Stories are a way of caring for ourselves, each other, and for the planet. And through stories, we discover what it really means to be human. Thank you. Our closing hymn for this morning is the Circle Game in your order of service. Let's sing together.
Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of a star. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captives on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. Then the child moved 10 times round the seasons, skated over 10 clear frozen streams. Words like, when you're older must appease him, and promises of someday make his dreams. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captives on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. 16 springs and 16 summers gone now. Cartwheels turn to car wheels through the town, and they tell him, take your time, it won't be long now, till you drag your feet too slow the circles down. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. captives on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came and go round and round and round in the circle game. So the years spin by and now the boy is 20. Though his dreams have lost some grandeur coming true, there'll be new dreams, maybe better dreams and plenty before the last revolving year is through. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came and go round and round and round in the circle game. And go round and round in the circle game.
Please be seated. You are. By the way, Laura wrote every word of our joint sermon. And now, in our going, may God bless us and keep us. May the light of God shine upon us and out from within us, and be gracious unto us and grant us peace. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen.